All right. You got your coffee?
I did indeed.
Nice.
Who have we got here today?
Let's see. I see Heather's here. I heard that Neil has to run a quick errand, but he will be back.
Okay. There's Buddy James.
And this is. You ever remember Romper Room? They used to have
Who's
this.
JW?
That's Jim. Jim Wenninger.
That's me. Oh, right. Good.
Yeah.
Is Ito going to be here?
He may be. I'm not sure. There's this whole consciousness thing going on that we're having a little bit of strife over. Not too bad, but just a bit.
Well, please let me know. Tell me about that. I don't know. About that.
Yeah. No, I'll share. Let's see. Let me get my screen going here.
Welcome to the November 20th edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we have Jim, Heather, Buddy, Richard, Robert, and David. They are discussing the Sheldrake Nature of Consciousness, natural disasters and how they are covered in the ritualistic media, and the electric nature of life. Please like and subscribe below.
Right, okay, here we go.
This is all becoming Borealis.
This is becoming Borealis, yeah. So this one, let's see, this is one of the most recent things they put on Thunderbolts. And it's a character that wrote a book about consciousness, very similar to the article that you wrote. But he was promoted pretty quickly, and then he's Princeton graduate, was in business, and then he had this epiphany, spent 4 days, wrote an entire book, and they're kind of promoting him. So I think it may, I think that may be the cause of the strife a little bit. So,
well,
just for
okay,
we're just talking. We don't have to include this in the thing.
What's his thesis?
His thesis is that matter is created from consciousness rather than consciousness being matter. So,
okay, and
he's pretty erudite about it. I've gone through it, and he's covering a lot of the points that have been bubbling up a bit, and the ones that you're pointing at as well. So,
well, I mean, it's something that sages have said for a long time, and yeah, there's people working on that. But he seems to, evidently he was particularly articulate, or
yeah, he's very articulate for sure,
and reached a certain audience.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things. I mean, I think it's a matter of them promoting this guy from nowhere. I think perhaps, and then this kind of tact, because it's a different tact. This is the guy, the end to upside down thinking. So.
Okay, so somebody who comes from nowhere on the basis of their ideas is somebody we should have respect for. That's what the electric universe is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I love this. I love this.
The whole
line.
Thunderbirds project is people from nowhere.
Right. I love this line of thinking. By the way, I mean, it's a very. I think this is part of what's bubbling up ultimately. At least kind of.
So what's the controversy? You said there was controversy.
Well, you were talking about Ito, and I think Ito's not. He kind of feels that it's too airy fairy, woo woo, kind of thing, versus
well,
versus a scientific analysis.
Oh, so does it bother him to talk about it, or he just doesn't agree?
I don't know. I think we have to ask him. I would be making suppositions otherwise.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he doesn't have to buy it. So he's working on the crystallized matter.
Right.
and he doesn't know where it came from any more than any of us do. So we say it's consciousness. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And I've dove in recently. I don't know if you've done any looking at it's a very interesting character, Rudolf Steiner, from the late 1800s or early 1900s, and it's theosophy and then anthroposophy, and really fascinating stuff that was going on back then. And it gets into the esoteric pretty quickly, of course. But he was super prolific. He's the creator of the Waldorf schools, which are still active and vibrant, apparently. And then also
and very good, very very good schools.
Yeah, absolutely. So and the theme that this I think it's Mark Gober is very along the lines of Rupert Sheldrake, etc. So I think ultimately it's a positive. So for me, from my subjective standpoint. So
do you know Dean Radin?
Yeah, well, I know of him. Yeah, I haven't had the chance. I know you reference him. So.
Well, I mean, he's right up there with Sheldrake, and he wrote a book called The Conscious Universe, and also he just wrote a new one that I read called Real Magic.
Okay.
Where what he does is he simply reframes, like the research has been done showing there really is telekinesis, there really is mental telepathy and clairvoyance, and all these things really do exist. Not necessarily always reproducible by every pair of people, but and recast that as saying, well, magic is real. Those are all magic. That's what we call magic.
Right.
And he says, yeah,
I like the line. There's nothing magic about magic. I like that line.
Yeah, I mean, he's the book is called Real Magic, and he's just basically saying, this magic we've always talked about and laughed at is real.
Right. And then you start looking at the, I mean, I had never. It was always something that was taboo, but over the last just short period of time, I've dove decently hard into what the literature is about alchemy and hermetic principles, etc. As you know, we've been talking about a little bit, but it's fascinating, and it's like I find myself like resonating with it quite a bit because it's there's an imagination spark that goes along with it, that's fun. It's like I kind of get it was kind of like a playing with crayons or something, that sense that you have as a child when you start. Oh, look at this color and what this color does, etc.
So you're gonna. Well, we'll have to make time for you to report on some of that research you did.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, I would love to.
Like even Steiner. Yeah.
And then the history of that, etc. So that was, and he was a Goethe scholar. He published like it was an anthology of all the scientific writings of Goethe. So he was quite a respected academician as well.
Oh,
so that makes him, and that was all like,
that's very interesting.
Yeah, and it's like it wasn't until he was like in his 40s that he moved into this. He was associated with theosophy, and then the other side of it is the Madame Blavatsky, and she's got all this kind of tonality around her. But that was the theosophy movement, and then they broke off, and they kind of had a shrift, and then that's where anthroposophy was formed, and so those two are still in existence,
well, what are they? I mean, are they like religious organizations? Or?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a mixture, actually. I mean, I wouldn't say I don't know. I mean, how do you frame it? It's kind of its own animal, actually, but it's certainly about consciousness. Because Manly P. Hall, are you familiar with him at all?
No.
He was a pretty famous theosophist and did quite a bit of writing, and he's become kind of there's certainly a lot of traffic on people who have devoted YouTube videos to his writings, etc. And they're pretty exotic and a lot about fields like body fields, body dynamics, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there's one of the interesting things that he points out here is that, speaking about the fires, you've seen the fires in California, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the the logical fallacies is what's the word for it? When events happen simultaneously, it doesn't necessarily mean causation. Because they do MRIs on the brain, and they can see by affecting different areas that it affects certain behaviors within the brain. How I'm sure you've probably seen this if they do electrodes. I've got a crazy story that I heard when I was working at Cedars about this one. But just in general, they could stop certain activities by affecting certain parts of the brain, and he's making the point that coincidence doesn't necessarily imply causation. So that's kind of a good point.
Well, there's a famous presentation. I don't know whether it was Sheldrake or who that did it, but if you take the analogy of a television,
right.
So you could start doing probes. You could say, well, when certain things happen on the screen, things are always happening in the circuitry,
right,
and therefore what you see on the screen is generated within the television,
right. Yes, exactly.
So. Right. So, it turns out those experiments prove nothing except that the brain plays a role.
Right.
Right. Is correlated. There is that
the correlation.
There is the correlation, but that doesn't mean it originates there.
Yeah. That's the phrase, actually. Correlation does not indicate causation. Yeah.
So it just shows that's the part of the mechanism where the signals come in or whatever, or carry out the orders of something.
Right. So, it's very interesting, and it's it's a lively discussion for sure. We get into the observer, and of course this is kind of the cornerstone of quantum mechanics, etc. So
that's what I'd like to hear Ido comment on.
Yeah.
Because he makes the statement that he's not. I don't know. Somehow he's outside of quantum physics.
Right.
So he should have something very definite to say about that picture.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a full support of the looking at the duality aspect of the model, and I appreciate the direction Ido goes, very often.
Well, if somehow we can get rid of the whole idea of a collapsing wave, that would be amazing. But I guess I haven't seen anything in that direction, and so if Ido has something, I'd love to hear it.
Mm-hmm. The one problem I have with the production that they've done here is they've got this picture of him, right?
Yeah.
But then, maybe it's Dean Radin. I don't know. Is that Dean Radin there?
Let's see. That might be, probably.
Okay.
I'm not sure. That's at Noetic. I mean, that's his place, Noetic.
Okay.
But he
lets
lots of other people give presentations there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you do a Wikipedia on Dean Radin or something to see what he looks like.
Right.
It's probably him.
Yeah, I think Joe was just up there for a conference. So.
I've given a couple talks there.
Oh, really? What's it like?
Well, it's a little like a resort place. There's a like dining room, and I think there's some places to stay, and I think he would do certain kinds of conferences there, maybe.
Okay.
But then my friend Sergio, who knows him and lives in the area, brings people in to talk. And so I gave a talk on my sort of my climate change model based on ice core records and electrical signals. There he is. That's him.
Okay, right.
And then another one on ideas of community empowerment, and my other thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, Edgar Mitchell founded that, apparently, right?
Founded what? Noetic?
No, wasn't it?
Oh.
And the Ion Institute. Right.
Oh, along with, I always thought Dean Radin was kind of the center of it.
I think, well, Edgar Mitchell's passed, but I think the guy who sparked it off was, at least that's my understanding. So.
Okay.
So I had the opportunity. He spoke at my graduation from high school, actually. So I knew the family, which is a little weird, but
okay.
But, yeah.
Well, you're a man with connections.
So are you. Yeah. So let's see. Who do we have on there? It's everyone's kind of silent today. But Jim, how's it going?
They've got their mics turned off.
I know. It's kind of, we've done that because there's so much noise if everyone leaves their mics on. So it's a courtesy thing for people to turn them on, to mute whenever they're not talking.
Oh.
So and the quality goes up on the recordings. So. But
there was a new protocol I introduced when I was gone. Okay.
Yeah, we did. We actually did a little bit of rebranding. So, and perhaps just for the holidays, but skeletons are a little spooky for the holidays. So I'll just show you real quickly here.
Well, I'm sure I'm in favor.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, so it's more. It's
anything's better than them skull and bones, right?
Oh, I love see skull and bones, right? It's yeah. So this is.
Well, I like order. See, I'm an anarchist, and anarchism is all about creating order from the bottom.
Okay.
Creating something that is voluntary and transparent and changeable, but orderly.
Okay. Well, there's an implication with anarchism that it's chaotic.
Well, but that's the powers that hierarchical governments for the last many thousand years have all feared the people, and anarchism is the people, and so they give it a bad name.
That chaotic, nature, right.
And some of the worst are people that they want to be anarchists. They call themselves anarchists. So I actually went and stayed at what they called a squat, a huge old building, several stories, that was occupied by a group of anarchists.
Okay.
So-called.
Lovely, right.
And
anarchist evening entertainment.
What anarchism to them, Matt, is to sit around all day smoking dope and nobody doing the dishes and
right, and then mold growing. Yep.
And
I've been around that. It's a little frightening.
It's like they don't know anything about anarchism.
Right.
Although they could probably talk to you about Buchanan and people. They've never thought about what it really means.
How to actually do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and what its consequences should be. I mean, its consequences should be like, speaking very generally here and skipping lots of steps, sort of means that there's no need for government. Aren't any problems for government to solve.
Right.
Whereas people like that taking squats, all they're doing is creating a need for police.
Right. Yeah. I've always that idea has always been very appealing to me, where it's no government.
Yeah, there has to be governance. I mean, there are things.
Governance and agreement, like collective agreement. Yeah.
There needs to be, if you want roads or whatever, that's not something an individual builds one in front of his house, like a libertarian might think.
Mm-hmm.
It takes, allocation of resources and collective effort, and et cetera.
Right. But this, I was watching, it's the, I guess, Prime Minister of France this is where it gets really dicey, and it's certainly the hot issue, but he's stating very demonstrably and loudly that patriotism is not nationalism, and he's saying that and it's the idea of having him put in as like basically the leader of Europe, breaking all those borders, and at least, and this was kind of mainstream reporting, but positioning him as EU leader,
Macron.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I guess because the old lady is dwindling.
Okay.
Merkel.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he is such a twit. He's a total pawn of the globalists.
Right.
Trying to bring in world government, and he's just such, an idiot. He's immature. I don't know.
Well, I mean, to me, they're all pawns, But
yeah.
You think that's too far to jump? It doesn't feel like it for me. But.
No. I mean, they are, but he's just so transparently no deeper than a puppet skin,
Uh-huh. Right. Right. Yeah, I dove into this guy's really interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. I'm interested if you've heard of him before. But let's see if I can find him.
Who?
Yeah. Well, I gotta get his name here because he's pretty compelling. Yeah, Joseph Farrell, Dr. Joseph Farrell.
I mean, you're an amazing researcher, David.
Oh no, I didn't know.
Tell us about Joseph Farrell.
Joseph Farrell is a buddy. Have you heard of him before? Joseph Farrell.
Not yet. No.
Okay, I highly recommend this video. Right, it's
okay.
Knights Templar and then MK Ultra. It's like combine those two. So it's a pretty awesome. But Joseph Farrell is a...
Wait, who's RH? RH is making lots of noise.
Wait a minute. I have my speaker off. How the hell can I be making noise?
No, it's not off.
Well, it says off. I can't do that.
I can hear you.
Wrong button.
I can hear you too. So it couldn't be very off. That's an amazing. Hey, my microphone's off. Can't you hear me?
Yeah. How dare you say my microphone's off? Yeah.
So, real quick before we jump into what you were going to talk about here, David, I just discovered this place called Pools Land. You want to talk about anarchy? This is in British Columbia in Canada.
Uh-huh.
And the governor allows this place to exist. And she is inspiring other communities to allow there to be like a dog patch area that people just kind of ignore in most communities because it's therapeutic. This place is really, really cool. It's pretty strange, but yeah, these guys are anarchists for sure.
Okay. I like the text.
So, do you know anything about it? I mean, how many there are? What do they do economically?
I guess it's been around for a couple of decades, at least, and they don't like, or really, it's frowned upon to come there with hard drugs like cocaine, heroin, things like that. But I guess it's okay to come and grow weed, bring weed, LSD, psychotropics, things like that, of that nature. And it kind of reminds me of like Burning Man community 24/7. This is like a place, or Rainbow Gathering, maybe more like Rainbow Gathering. Rainbow Gathering is a bunch of hippies who just basically live off of the land and stuff. But the Vice episode that I watched was so sick. This girl drank some of the stuff this guy was making with his he made a weed smoothie the guy's like, I can eat an ounce of leaves of weed a day. And
wow.
and he adds some old nasty rotten hamburger into the smoothie to help break down the leaves in his stomach.
Oh, God.
It's crazy. Macrobiotic smoothie. So, but anyway.
Oofed. Yeah.
Mm. Well,
no alcohol, huh? No alcohol.
60s, back in the 70s, say that lots of people, moved to Oregon, went back to the land, bought land together, had communes, kind of thing. And most of them didn't last very long. And there has to be something.
We had one where I was growing up. That it was a commune on Lake Street in North Jersey, in the Upper Saddle River, and it existed for three years until there was some kind of squabble inside because it ended up there. From my understanding, like who's the leader? It ends up being King of the Hill, and then it dissolved ultimately. Yeah, it was kind of a collective thing, but then it naturally formed into a hierarchy.
Well, I mean, so many of those things, they really start just wanting to be counterculture. Let's get away, let's get off the grid, let's form a community, and that's about the motivation. Mm-hmm. And there's just nothing sustainable in that. I mean, you've got to be getting together about something. There's got to be some economic idea, like you're growing some special crop or something,
Right.
Or you have, maybe it's a religious thing, or
there's economic for sure. They're actually buying this one guy that's there. You want to talk about hierarchy? There's one guy that's there that's going to buy the entire city because of his weed. He's grows so much weed that he's going to purchase the city so that it can stay there for good.
So it's all about weed.
Oh, you mean there's a surrounding straight city you're talking about?
He's going to, whatever this is, he's going to purchase this whole area due to his crops and the money that he's made off of it. And the whatever is the law, the mayor or whatever around the area, she's for it. She likes the idea of people going there. And a lot of people go there to detox and to get away from drugs, the hard drugs, But yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm sure there's other places like it in the world, but it's the first place I've heard
places like this in LA.
San Francisco.
I'm really, yeah, exactly.
I heard that there's more of a problem with poop, human feces,
that might be a problem. Yeah,
San Francisco than anything.
Yeah. This rings back of the merry pranksters, right?
Well, I was just in San Francisco a couple of days ago, and fortunately, the places I went didn't have such problems.
Okay, right.
But it was, I don't know if you know, well, it's the whole Bay Area is totally full of smoke from fires up north.
Right.
The wind blows it down. It's like you can't believe how thick it was. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was on an upper floor in Civic Center area, and you could only see a few of the buildings, and it was just like pea soup.
Okay.
I guess none of that came down to. Well, you get some from we got
the whole
coastal fires.
Yeah, because Malibu just got destroyed, So that was pretty significant here. It was interesting how the media played it. I mean, apocalyptic. It's always. I mean, it's the end of the world. How they do hyperbolic language on all this stuff.
And huge headlines.
Yeah. But it's to me, from being out there, it's like building multi-million-dollar houses on like kindling, and these fires have come through, consistently, at least the times that I've been out here, and from my understanding of the history of it, it's been for as long as people have been out here. Every year, the Santa Anas come through, and something gets sparked, and these areas just go up. It's just part of the natural cycle.
They also they get a lot of flooding, don't they?
So sometimes. Then you get all the erosion from that too.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's but once again, here's the media with like getting everyone all freaked out about Anyway, anything. There's always that argument that okay, this is they're there to their job is to make money, etc. And somehow they get a pass for this, but there's a lot of cognitive influence that they have by throwing all these just hyperbolic terms all the time. I mean, it's the nature of marketing, etc. But it's pretty obnoxious, I would argue.
Well, there's a concept called the spectacle.
The spectacle. I
forget the guy's name who wrote the book. Very interesting fellow. Maybe I could look it up at some point. But just think that, we live as spectators of a spectacle.
Right.
And we Trump is just one that's in this part of the spectacle, and and
exactly.
all these things going on, and it's just it's like a program you're watching. Right. There's no sense of had any sense of agency in it.
Yeah, but it
plays just a spectator.
It plays with your emotions all the time, right?
Yeah, right. Keeps you,
polarized.
Your life is.
I got to be in order to be identified. I got to be either at this group or this group. Or which group do I choose? What's the good one? What's the bad one? And it's like they're telling you which one, according to your makeup, is the group that you belong to.
Well, the enunciation of the journalists as well is addictive. You listen to it, and I myself stay away from as much news and stuff like that as I possibly can, being TV free since 2006.
Yeah, I beat you, 1999. So.
But when you do see it, it has this nostalgia, homey type of like Christmas. Like, all right, we're bringing in the holidays, we're blah, 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 blah. And then like the next sentence, they're talking about killing virus and this and that. But it's addictive. It releases those.
It's ritualistic. It's very subtly ritualistic.
Yeah. It's like they're all trained in the same school to how to enunciate to make you feel certain ways.
Yeah. That NLP. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Yes.
Neurolinguistic program.
I experienced that. I know what you mean, but I hadn't articulated it. That when there's a news broadcast on, there's this urge to sit back and watch and find out how it is.
And it's hypnotic.
Stop doing what you're doing and just pay attention. And it doesn't really matter anymore. It's almost like smoking weed or something. Like it's a drug. It's like, okay, now we don't really need to do anything. Just pay attention and relax. Drink your coffee. And those morning shows are just as bad. The View, and they're all getting jacked up on alcohol and all these shows in the morning. They're drinking at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, like because they got to be lively, and they're doing it on air.
I've done that.
I
know what that feels like.
There was a group called the Dead Kennedys.
Yeah, I remember them. Yeah, definitely.
And they had a line. One of their songs was "Television, drug of the nation, teaching ignorance and spreading radiation." Television, the drug of the nation.
Yeah. Who was that? Who's the singer now? He's become Henry Rollins. Was he involved with that for a while? I think.
All I know is some friends played it for me from a tape or something.
Yeah.
And they said it was the Dead Kennedys.
Yeah.
So it's in Marxian terms, it's the opiate of the people has become television,
right?
Rather than religion,
right. Well, I mean, this is where this is a very interesting conversation. Whether this is the flow of consciousness.
Let's get back to Farrell, yes.
Nature. but it ties right in because this is ultimately what he's talking about. And one of the things that he let me see if I can give you an overview of what he looks at. It's MK Ultra and mind control ultimately. So, and he ties it together historically. So what are the methodologies of mind control? And he says the soft ones have been always, the arts and religion, right? So it turns out he was a church organist, like in a large, those are very interesting geometries when you start to look at it. Buddy was probably interested in this, like the big cathedral.
Walter Russell was also a church organist for a little bit.
But one of the things that he kind of illustrates is that the geometry of those big cathedrals is basically it's the projection of a tesseract or a hypercube, and the instrument, you're actually in the instrument, and it's the idea of what the music was. He argues that the Baroque composers were not. There's a big shift that happened into the Romantic period, but the Baroque composers were basically artisans using certain like sequences of notes to bring a collective spiritual energy that would be focused in the cathedral, and then that was a methodology, and it goes back to the mystery schools for some reason. And ultimately, his thesis, it goes back to Egypt. So this is a really fascinating idea to me.
Well, I think in the history of the Templars, they go to Jerusalem and they take over the temple, and they dig down in the temple and discover things. And so, like, the whole grand Gothic architecture came from what they learned in Jerusalem somehow. That's
right. Someone
had that theory, and the timing seemed to fit. Do you know anything about that?
That's what he talks about in this, actually. And
oh, okay.
So
Robert Hawthorne just turned his mic back on.
Oh, Robert, awesome. Robert has some insight into
Robert
this.
Hawthorne had just walked into a Chinese buffet and wanted to see and hear. I really thought my microphone, it set off.
What are they charging today?
There'll be a mute button on your picture, Dad, if you actually have your mic muted. It tells you.
Well, I did. I saw, but it said right at the bottom, microphone off, and the little round thing.
No, your speaker was off. Your microphone was still off. There are two different buttons. We went over this.
But he's doing good. He sounds good. You sound good, actually. So
okay, if it's on now, I called because I wanted to say something. Yesterday I was thinking about this, and it just so happens that two things that I wanted to tell you about are what you're talking about, which seems to me to be, well, number one, marijuana, but the other thing is you're just getting into the architecture and everything else. And I was thinking just thinking it, and it kind of fits in. I always wondered what the temples or the cathedrals and all that were built for, and the Catholic Mass and the singing and all that other stuff. And you're talking about that. And I started thinking this morning, I had heard that before the languages were confounded, the Adamic language, or the language of Adam, was perfect, and the communication of it was absolute. When we say a word, if you don't know the definition of that word or what you think it means at this day, our communication is getting pretty pathetic because words don't mean the same anymore. But they say that in this was a perfect language, that when you communicated to somebody, your thoughts were perfectly communicated to theirs. Therefore, they almost could communicate with thoughts rather than
telepathically.
Right? But I don't know that that's true, because vocalization, the harmonics of it, when you're talking about electricity, it's a frequency, it flows, and whatever it flows. But they have found out that DNA in humans does produce a sound, not audibly to human ears, but maybe to a dog's or a mouse, I don't know. But they prove it's a sound.
There's a vibratory nature to it.
Yeah, if all DNA then is a sound, and it makes a specific sound, and the shamans say that the plants talk to them through a song and they all chant, I kind of believe that harmonics are sort of like the basis of knowledge, and that languages, when you speak it, the harmony of it, the sounds, is actually the signals that you're looking at. A lot of words and root words, I don't know, entomology, or whatever they call it, you can have like in the Knights Templars you were talking about, they worship Melchizedek, and then some of the earlier people like that referred to him as, instead of Melchizedek, it was Michael Zadok, Melchizedek. Same thing, different vowels. And so if they took the Catholic Mass and you're saying that they developed harmonies that could teach things, it was also what the Egyptians used for healing.
Right.
They used sound, and that's what Eileen McCusick is doing now. She's using tuning forks. They used to have people lay hands on your head, it got on your body, all over your body, 8, 10 people, and they would ohm, that ohm or whatever, and they're saying that's at the 432 megahertz or whatever sound quality number.
Hertz.
That's the sound of God. The Jewish big horns blew at that. They're curing cancer with that vibration. And so when you went to Mass, it was sort of like a duplication of the early church before that, when you paid. They didn't have doctors. They didn't have nurses.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing with talking about the Catholic Church, etc. Because I've studied a little bit of composition, and one of the things that I found very interesting about it, when you look at that period of time and you try to write in that style, is there are things that are actually absolutely forbidden to do, as far as like choosing intervals. And there's one interval called the tritone that is also called the devil's interval. In that, and ultimately this is the root. This is what makes blues sound. This is what makes blues sound good ultimately. But it was actually like you would be excoriated if you used it in any composition you were writing. It was pretty fascinating.
So they did the study, I think, at the University of Miami a long time ago, that they found that by playing discordant sound, you could raise boils on a person's arm. And so there's not virus there ain't no bad. It's sound. And so sound can do an awful lot. And I do believe that it's the communication of life.
Obviously, you see, anyone who has ever listened to music, which is everyone, you feel the emotion that you get off different, chords. Ultimately, just chords.
Yeah, and so that can heal your body. It vibrates, and everything's a vibration. Everything is really frequency and sound. And so when they built the buildings, the mass sound and everything else was producing actual healing qualities to it. And they did have it. You would come every week and you'd get kind of this vibrational vigor. You push back up, because that would accentuate, like going to a drum thing.
Okay. Let me ask this. Do you think that the buildings were designed with sound intention first to build based off of acoustics? Or do you think that it was based off of beauty, and then because it's beautiful, it just, of course, it's going to acoust correctly? Because it's almost like a combination of two. If you build it using domes and using the OG arcs that they do in so much of the geometry and the architecture, then a natural consequence of using these types of beautiful shapes that we see in nature, resonant shapes, it builds resonant cavities and thus produces the sound to be amplified to our desire. What do you think? Do you think that it's based on that the sound is first that they design it, or just beauty, or what?
Well, there's a lot of things that are beautiful that don't create really harmonics, but I think what they do is they, like a tuning fork, it works at a certain frequency. If you make it different, it doesn't. And with architecture, I've found out that they put pyramids an awful lot of times over places of learning, and then of places of legislation, and that they put domes, like over state capitals. Churches have pyramids. There's a lot of different functions in shape. And so the Jewish language is, I think, the only language that says it is perfect in its form, or its form, it has to be perfect. It is sacred. It's sacred in its form, is what they say. It's a divine symbol. And so that's why the Torah, when it was written on 17 feet, with every letter, if you moved one out of the space, out of the position it should be in, or it wasn't perfect, you had to do the whole scroll over. And they found out that the original Torah, the original one that was rolled up into a scroll, and put into these big gold cylinders into the Ark of the Covenant. There were 2 of them. And if one letter was wrong out of place, they had to change it. But they found out that the ink that is given in the Bible to Moses, here's how you make the damn ink. The ink is electrical conducting.
Now, let me interrupt 1 second because just to put a compare and contrast this, and it ties in with this video. He's speaking about the Dead Sea Scrolls in here, like it's around 130 as I remember, because I was looking at it last night, and he's saying that the Essenes were responsible for the Dead Sea Scrolls, and these came out in 47, right, 1947, which I find very interesting. Okay. But he's stating that, and this is confirmed by it's one of the major, I think it's Josephus, in like 100 A.D. But
fake news.
You think? Oh,
just kidding. Just kidding.
Come on. Sorry. Well, okay. Blah blah blah. Do your own research. Right? Do your own research. So. But I'll just put this out in the air at least. But one of the things that is pretty apparent from the Dead Sea Scrolls, they were packaged by the Essenes, and that ultimately goes back to the Egyptians. And one of the things that the line is that the entire background of which has been stated throughout our Christianity, that that the line of Christ goes back through David and then back into that whole line. It's like, oh no, he was an Egyptian, as Moses was an Egyptian. So it's like, so this hijacking, perhaps.
Moses was a Hebrew, though.
Well, supposedly, but there's all these factions that happen, and then who's in power? I mean, because it becomes a very interesting kind of puzzle and point of intrigue, which we may never find the answer to, but it's nice to see different colorations on it.
When Christ was an Essen, he was a priest of the Essen community, and he was they were artisans. They were the cunning. They were the craftsmen of the times. They were the metallurgists.
Alchemy, right?
So here, listen to this.
But tell us about the Essenes. I want to know who they were.
Okay, the Essenes and their Essenes were 200 miles south or something like that of the area. But what was amazing about it is they set this community way off from everybody else for some reason. They have found that they had water aqueducts from 200 miles away to the Dead Sea. Now, why the hell would you live out in the desert and then transport heavily salted water into the desert? Why? You can't drink it. You could hardly cook with it. They did it because if you read Lawrence Gardner's book on the ancient secrets of the sacred ark, and that is that's the book that was written before what's his name wrote the Da Vinci Codes. And what's his name? That was sort of a story. But the whole basis comes out. What were the Essenes doing, and what did they actually do at Dendera with the temple of Isis, who was the goddess of the gold, and everybody else, the Hathelput or whatever her name was, she was the goddess of the gold. And they say that at Dendera, that's where that thing that looks like a Raytheon tube or something's chipped into the wall. They say that what they were doing there was taking gold that was given to them from all over the world and turning it into this white powder they called mufkets, or the Egyptians called it shanana. Or shanana. I don't know, maybe I get the words mean something, but what the heck. Anyways, that's what they called it, and it was when you would transmute gold into its purest form, it becomes a white powder that you cannot burn or do anything with. It's in these basic stage. And so the white bread that was given to all the pharaohs for longevity and immortality was based on this stuff that Susan's into, I believe, or Gene Hafner. And that's Ormus, O-R-M-I-M-U-S. And Orme is O-R-M-E. And that means orbitally realigned monoatomic element. What that means is on all, I don't know because I ain't Edwin Call, but what I think I heard is that on all atoms, they have pairs of electrons that spin around them, and the two outer ones, the two outer electrons, always spin the opposite way. So what happens with the royal metals? The royal metals are gold, silver, and the platinum group. I think also you can do it with copper now, but I'm not sure. But you can take that into what they call the high state. Now, that's our scientists. They call it the high state of its element. And what this book of Gardner said was they were able to use direct current electricity and take, and they're doing this now at Fermi Labs and other places where it is documented it's possible. They're doing it. And they're able to take direct electricity into a bar of gold or a mound of gold, whatever kind of gold, little flakes of gold, and zap it with this. It gets to the point where the gold will melt down, but instead of burning into like black carbon, it expands into a tremendous light that just expands through the whole room, but there's no power. The wind don't blow or nothing. And then that whole pile of gold disappears. Now, this sounds like bullshit to me, but I read the book 3 times to understand what they're talking about. And it's what everybody's doing today. So,
but if I remember what Gardner said is that it would, you put it into a certain state and it would become invisible. But then it would, when the energy comes down, it would reappear.
Well, it did 3 stages. When they would zap it, it would turn liquid, and then it would just go completely into this white powder. The powder was like it wouldn't stay. It was very fine powder, and then it would disappear. And so then they could bring it back. Then they would bring back the powder. And so they wondered at that point, is it really disappearing or is it just like invisible? So they waited until the gold went to this white powder, and it was a pile. They took one of those sticks and they moved the pile all around. And then they made it disappear, and it came back, messed around. I mean, so
it's just invisible.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't there. That's what they call in Egypt. In Egypt, they referred to it in all their history, the plain of Charon. And what they're saying now, it is a different place of physicalness, that the gold bar actually will disappear, and it loses, this is amazing, it loses 40% of its specific gravity weight. So when the gold bars, let's say this, they would take 7 grams of gold and put it on a little plate, and the plate would weigh 3 grams. That's 10 grams. Then it would go into this white powder state, and it would lose 40% of its weight. Then
it sounds like a Birkeland current in glow mode and dark mode. Almost.
Yeah, you ought to read the book, because I had the, and so what they're saying is the Egyptians knew this, and they were able to take gold and make it into this white powder. Now, when Petrie or whoever it was did the original 1910 or some early year, he went out down there to Dendera, and they were looking for artifacts, looking for gold and all this, because they had heard this is where the gold came from and all that. There was nothing there. They couldn't find anything. But what Petrie says he found was these gold or these stone boxes outside that were in the ground and dug into the ground with their holes lined with stone. And they were big, big containers. And when he uncovered them, they were fine. He writes it in there that he found this very fine, extremely fine white powder. And he thought, oh, this is where they hid the gold treasure. So he sifted through it in the wind and found it empty, nothing under there. And that was the white powder gold. They're using this now. They're doing it, right? You can look it up. I mean, I'm not kidding.
I'm looking at it, yeah.
So they're saying that that's what they were able to do. And when you take it, here's what we do know from it today. On your DNA, each long strand of DNA has at the end of it these things called telomeres.
Right.
It's telomerosity.
This is a fact. They know this for sure.
Okay,
and they're associated. They're associated with longevity.
Right. Well, because here's what happens: a normal cell will split for 7 years, and then it dies. But what causes it to do that? And they found that the telomeres on the end of each string of DNA are like the little plastic things on your shoelaces. Every time that cell splits, a little of that shoelace edge is then worn off. When it leaves, it's a tattered end, and that's what they say. It won't split properly, and it dies. Here's what happens. If you take a royal metal like gold and put it into the high state, where what happens is the outer electrons reverse and go the same way as all the other ones. So they rediverse their direction at that one critical point. Therefore, that atom will not have the electrical ability to bond to another atom. And so they're monoatomic elements. Now, I don't know how they form a powder, because one atom would just become atomized or some shit and disappear. But they remain as a powder form that can be transmuted right back into solid gold. And so they say that by doing that, one atom attaches to the ends of your telomeres, or the telomeroses, the thing that creates the telomeres. And at that point, they stop losing any space. They just stop eradicating them off. So that cell will become immortal. They know that. It's immortal. They do that. Like the frog gyno or fetus or something that never grows older. So that's what happens. So they were trying to do that with the pharaohs. And when in the Bible, when they asked King Tyre, why do you give all that gold to Solomon and everything? And he says, well, because he gives my family the white bread. That's what it was for. You give him the gold. They processed it, that dendera and everything else, and learned how to do it. And then the church got very wealthy. The same thing happened at the time of Herod with the second building of the temple. They said they rediscovered it, and that's what they were doing with it. That's where they got all the gold for the next building. Then, I guess it was when the Knights Templars go down there and dig down, supposedly found the Ark of the Covenant, which does all this shit. If you read about it, what it did is it would levitate itself off into the distance and kill everybody there. And that the Levites, that were the carriers of the temple, by the way, levitation, they were the group that didn't have priesthood. They were the carriers of the sacred thing, and you had to be barefoot or you got zapped to hell and back like Ozzy did when he touched it. And so all those things happened. They had the Ark of the Covenant, which it did other things. But it would be able to be tuned in and then actually transmute gold into white powder, which they used to sell to the pharaohs, and that's how they got this. But it was done by the priest, the high priest, the goddess of Isis and stuff.
Part of the legend of the Ark of the Covenant is it traveled around a lot with the Templars, and in the end they had to get rid of it. So. Evidently, that happened in Chartres Cathedral, and there's on one of the pillars somewhere in the Chartres Cathedral, it says the Ark left here.
Huh?
Something like that.
Yeah, it left here. Well, they say it, and this is in the Antiquities of the Jews, not the Scriptures. That's the religion, but the Antiquities of the Jews is their history, and it says in that history that the what you were just going to say. I forget it now. It was about the Ark of the Covenant.
In the Templars and having it.
Yeah, and the Knights Templars, when they came over here, that's this whole story they have in America on Oak Hill or Oak Island Mystery, where they dig down to find it, and they're finding all kinds of stuff.
Well, he goes into it here. Columbus. If you remember the sails on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, that's the insignia of the Knights Templar.
Yeah, right. Well, that's why they named Arkansas.
Really?
The name of that comes from of course. The name of that, I wouldn't just tell lies. Anyway, I don't lie. Anyways, that's where it came from. When they found out how'd you get the name, they say this is where the Ark was brought. And what's under Arkansas? There's vast caves. They ain't never got into all of them yet. And so if you're going to bury something and you knew that, you would go there. But how did
is that what Bill and Hillary were doing down there?
How did the Knights Templars even be able to navigate like they did in Claude? Because they followed the sacred circles.
But this is where they say that it was already all, the exploration of Columbus coming over, they already had the maps. The maps already existed in Constantinople. Yeah. And it had been previously. They just decided they were going to do a big reveal to the general populace. This is the theory.
All the things are built on those great circles that they've plotted now, and they say when they intersect is where Teotihuacan is, and where they intersect is where the Great Pyramid is, and down in all those other Incas down there. That's where they'll cross, and where they cross is where the main places are to gather this piezoelectricity that they know now is in the pyramid, and granite lets it flow. So they built them, and that's why they
in there for some reason. Those are the piezoelectric keeps coming up from all these different angles.
Yeah. That real cathedral over in France or something that's got real small pinnacles that hold up this 400-ton originally lead roof. Well, that's because they were granite and everything they pushed down and crossed. And so they may have been able to light and cause lights to come on without electric wiring by using the great circles and bringing down piezoelectricity, and had a way of
compressing
something else, right?
Compressing the stone
without wires. Now here, if you and that's kind of that I wanted to tell you, the harmonics and voice and everything and singing and all that is beneficial to your health, and they're proving that now, that sound is almost vibrations is a better way to heal. And you know, when you meditate and everything, you even home to yourself a lot of times.
Well, that's it. I mean, it gets back to the Steiner stuff where it just
you don't even.
One sec. It gets back to the Steiner stuff where he's, you know, it's eurythmy, and it's. I mean, this is a very. It's kind of an interesting tie-in because it's promoting a life force. You know,
right?
Always,
life force, of course. There has to be one.
Yeah. Sorry,
anyway,
buddy, I interrupted you, but buddy,
it's okay.